Okay. So will I be able to see the live shot in addition to me, or what? So I'll know when to join it? Okay, so I can see, okay. That'd be good, yeah, thanks.
Clear again today
Is he
that
hit it?
preventing, pursuing, prosecuting, and punishing public corruption is among our highest priorities. It is why we established the Public Trust Unit that is dedicated to working major cases throughout our 23-county district. Just last Friday, we presented an indictment that detailed the serious allegations of a corrupt kickback scheme in which federal, state, and local government officials and others breached the public's trust and conspired to steal, and did in fact steal, from the public that they had been trusted to serve. Today, we are here to present the facts that are alleged in a separate case for which the indictment was unsealed earlier today. As alleged in the indictment, this case involves the corrupt abuse of public office for personal enrichment through a scheme to conspire and defraud the city of Lynn Haven of approximately $5 million taxpayer dollars in the aftermath of the catastrophe that was Hurricane Michael. The common thread in today's case and in last week's case is simply this: an egregious abuse of power and position by people in public service who betrayed their sacred duties, and those who sought to illegally scheme and conspire with them to breach the public's trust. Let the word go forth again that we will independently and aggressively pursue these cases through our public trust unit. Nothing will delay, deter, or distract us from this vital mission, because our nation's heart and soul depend on earning and maintaining the trust of the people in our government. Today, I am joined by Federal Bureau of Investigation Special Agent in Charge Rachel Rojas and Bay County Sheriff Tommy Ford. They will soon share with you their remarks about today's indictment. I'm also joined by Assistant United States Attorney Stephen Kunz. He is a senior prosecutor, and he serves within our public trust unit. Mr. Kunz is the primary prosecutor on this important case. In a few moments, he will describe the corrupt conduct that is alleged in the indictment. After Special Agent in Charge Rojas, Sheriff Ford, and Assistant United States Attorney Kunz complete their remarks, we will respond to some questions to the extent that we can. But before we address the particulars that are alleged in the indictment, I want to share some perspectives about the ongoing work of the Public Trust Unit. Every successful public corruption prosecution sends a powerful message to other corrupt officials and to officials who are being tempted by opportunities for corruption. And that message is, once again, we will come for you. But as importantly, it also sends an important message to every hardworking and law-abiding citizen that the institutions of our government are worth protecting, that your federal law enforcement agencies are out there serving you, bringing those who corrupt the system to justice, and that fraud and corruption will not be tolerated by our office. Our Public Trust Unit is able to bring these complicated and sensitive cases because of the significant resources that we are devoting to corruption investigations and prosecutions. We are proud to partner with the greatest law enforcement agencies in the world, particularly including the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and in this case, the partnership of Sheriff Tommy Ford and the Bay County Sheriff's Office. It is heartening to observe the commitment that the FBI brings to these cases, to follow the money, to decipher complicated paper trails, to find key witnesses, and to use the most sophisticated law enforcement tools to build and bring these important cases. In the pursuit of justice, we will use every aggressive legal tool at our disposal, such as wiretaps, surveillance, confidential informants, cooperators, undercover agents, and stings. We will also rely on the cooperation of elected and other government officials whose informed knowledge can help us investigate and prosecute corrupt government officials. In addition to these law enforcement tools and resources, our office's independence is critical to successfully prosecuting these public corruption cases. Our office will continue to build its reputation as one of the most independent prosecutors' offices in the entire country. Our only allegiance is to the facts, to the truth, and to the pure pursuit of justice. We embrace our independent role and this responsibility in all that we do. No institution or individual in our district is above the law. We want our fellow citizens to trust that they can come forward with tips and leads knowing that we will follow the evidence wherever it leads. We want citizens to know and trust that their tips and leads will be treated with respect and responsiveness. At this time, I'd like to introduce Assistant U.S. Attorney Stephen Kunz.
Thank you, Mr. Keefe. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The indictment returned today, or unsealed today, lists 5 defendants. And their names are Michael Edward White, former Lynn Haven City Manager; David Wayne Horton, Lynn Haven Community Services Director; David Mitchell White, no relation to Michael White. He's an owner of a company known as Erosion Control Specialists, also known as ECS. Joshua Daniel Anderson, he's an owner of a company in Bay County known as Greenleaf Lawn Care in Bay County. And last defendant charged is Shannon Dolores Rodriguez, also known as Shannon Dolores Harris. Now, the indictment is a 35-count indictment charging the defendants with conspiring to commit a fraud by means of wire communications. It charges 19 counts of substantive execution of wire fraud, the wire fraud scheme, and also conspiracy to commit money laundering. Now, Michael White and David Horton are also charged with substantive counts of theft concerning programs receiving federal funds and also honest services fraud. We'll talk about that just in a moment. Michael White and David White are also charged with filing false claims to the Federal Emergency Management Agency, known as FEMA. And Mr. Horton is also charged with mail fraud concerning the defrauding of an insurance company. Within days after Hurricane Michael devastated the greater Panama City area, the city of Lynn Haven adopted a local state of emergency for post-disaster relief and planning and approved a resolution waiving the procedures and the formalities otherwise required under Florida law, such as getting bids and following some other procedures in the state. And this was for the purpose to ensure the safety, the welfare, and the health of the citizens of Lynn Haven. And the indictment alleges that the emergency declaration was done within about 6 days after the hurricane, and it was ended about 2 weeks later. Now, the mayor of Lynn Haven and or her designee, the city manager, were authorized emergency powers to negotiate contracts, to expend public funds, to assist in the post-hurricane relief activities. This emergency declaration was ended 2 weeks later, and city manager Michael White negotiated an emergency agreement with David White and ECS to perform services for Lynn Haven. And the indictment alleges that David White used ECS and Joshua Anderson used the company known as Greenleaf as a means to fraudulently obtain approximately $5 million from Lynn Haven by submitting false invoices for services that were claimed to have been produced for Lynn Haven. The indictment also alleges that the city manager and Mr. Horton, the community services director of Lynn Haven, approved the invoices, the fraudulent invoices that were submitted by both ECS and Greenleaf, directed city employees to pay these invoices. And also Mr. Horton approved timesheets submitted by ECS and falsely verified the attendance of ECS employees at various claimed work locations in Lynn Haven. Now, the indictment also alleges that when ECS invoices were being assembled for submission to FEMA by Lynn Haven for reimbursement, it was discovered that many and most of the ECS invoices that had been paid provided no details in support of the required payments. When directed to provide additional documentation for the monies requested and already paid, Mr. White submitted false timesheets prepared by defendant Rodriguez. And the timesheets were false in terms of the number of individuals that were claimed to have worked, the locations where they worked, the time actually spent, the number of hours spent. All these things were false, and they were approved by both Mr. Michael White and Mr. Horton. Now, the indictment also alleged that other false documents and invoices were submitted that involved the payment by Lynn Haven unknowingly for services that weren't authorized on the emergency contract, and in fact, that they were services provided to personal residences of some of the Lynn Haven officials. And these officials included Michael White, the city manager, and Mr. Horton, the community services director. And the performance of the post-hurricane debris removal and repairs at the residences of these city officials were concealed and not disclosed in invoices. Instead, the invoices claimed that public areas in Lynn Haven were the locations where work was performed. Additionally, the indictment alleges that some other improper use of ECS employees were done with respect to wrapping Christmas gifts, preparing locations for a Halloween party, other miscellaneous acts in which individuals of both Greenleaf and ECS were paid anywhere from $35 to $90 per hour to do these activities. And this was not disclosed. Instead, the invoices falsely indicated that work was being performed with respect to debris removal or hurricane work at various locations in the city of Lynn Haven. Now, after the initial declaration of the emergency by Lynn Haven had been revoked and expired, Michael White and David Horton sought to locate additional projects that could provide money to both David White and Joshua Anderson. Now, one project was for ECS to conduct trash pickup using a pickup truck and a trailer at a cost of $300 per hour per crew throughout Lynn Haven. And the indictment alleges that despite the ability of Lynn Haven's waste trucks to pick up large amounts of household trash and deposit that trash at the dump here in Bay County, instead, false invoices were submitted by ECS for trash pickup for significant periods of time. In fact, the indictment alleges numerous occasions where invoices were submitted for cleanup in amounts of $300,000 to $500,000, falsely claiming trash pickup as early as October 18th of 2018. This continued through months after the hurricane, where significant amounts of money were paid for trash cleanup, despite it was not necessary and not actually performed. Now, two defendants in this case are also charged with honest services fraud, and that is a scheme to defraud and deprive the citizens of Lynn Haven of their right to honest services by city employees, namely Michael White and David Horton, through bribery or kickbacks. And the indictment also alleges that while David White and ECS were providing services to Lynn Haven, Michael White received things of value from David White that included repairs to and debris removal from Mr. White's residence in Lynn Haven, and he had a farm in Youngstown, outside Lynn Haven, of course, in Bay County, and extensive work and repairs were done there. There also $300,000 was paid to Mr. White for his farm and automobile by David White, while Mr. White is approving various invoices and getting projects for ECS. And the repairs to the residence and the farm of Mr. White, Michael White, were billed to Lynn Haven, but they were concealed. And instead, it was alleged in the invoices that were false that work was done and performed at locations in Lynn Haven itself. Additionally, Michael White solicited bids for additional projects at specific prices for work at city parks and asked David White to submit a bid and get some additional phony bids to making him the lowest bidder so this project could be awarded and the work performed and Lynn Haven pay ECS. David Horton received things of value from David White as well. In addition to repairs and debris removal from his own residence in Lynn Haven, Mr. Horton accepted payment for travel, lodging, meals, entertainment, and food from David White on multiple occasions. And the indictment, when y'all read it, indictment charges that in late December 2018, Mr. Horton was a recipient of a travel to Gatlinburg, Tennessee area, where David White spent $25,000 taking care of, for approximately a week period of time, Mr. White, his family, and some other individuals. Mr. Horton, the indictment alleges, also sent a text message to Mr. David White after the hurricane and asked an invoice be prepared for at least $3,500, if not more. David White then prepared and sent to Horton an ECS invoice claiming $9,600 worth of work that was provided for Mr. Horton and marked it paid in full. And the indictment alleges that Mr. Horton submitted this false invoice to an insurance company in support of his insurance claim for $9,600 and was paid money from the insurance company based on this. Now, the penalties for the offenses that are charged in the indictment are as follows. For the conspiracy to commit wire fraud, it's a maximum of 20 years imprisonment, $250,000 fine, and 5 years supervised release. For honest services fraud, it's the same penalty. For the individual wire fraud counts, it'd be the same penalty. The mail fraud, the same, and also the conspiracy to commit money laundering. For the charge of the theft concerning programs receiving federal funds, the maximum penalty is up to 10 years imprisonment, a $250,000 fine, and also 5 years supervised release. And last, the filing of false claims to the agency of the United States is punishable by up to 5 years imprisonment, a $250,000 fine, and 3 years supervised release. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Coons. Special Agent in Charge Rojas.
Good afternoon. I want to start by thanking U.S. Attorney Keefe, AUSA Stephen Kuntz, Sheriff Tommy Ford, and your entire team for your partnership on the case. Public corruption and government fraud investigations are often very complex and tedious, and we appreciate all of your support. As this case progresses, you, the public, will learn much more about this investigation. For now, I want to emphasize why this kind of work is so important to this community, to our state, and to our country. This case is just one in over 3,000 investigations that the FBI has initiated since 2015 into allegations of public corruption, election crime, or government fraud. The subjects arrested today add to the nearly 3,000 people who have been federally charged for their roles in those crimes. Rooting out this corruption is exceptionally difficult. It takes time and resources and can be very complicated. But it is among the most important work that the FBI does for our American public. Corrupt public officials undermine the integrity of our government and violate public trust, your trust. Abusing one's position for personal gain, especially in a time of crisis, is a blatant disregard to the oath that every government official takes. Moreover, federal assistance programs are established to help individuals, families, and businesses that have suffered tremendous loss. The money is intended to help them get back on their feet. Abusing these programs for self-gain is nothing short of egregious. The FBI is committed to protecting these programs from fraud to ensure that honest citizens can receive the assistance they deserve when they need a helping hand the most. This is why combating public corruption is the FBI's #1 criminal investigative priority. We are proud to be a part of the Public Trust Unit that was established by this office, and we will continue to work together with U.S. Attorney Keefe, AUSA Kuntz, Sheriff Ford, and the entire team on this case and beyond to ensure that those who commit fraud and corruption in our communities are brought to justice. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Special Agent in Charge Rojas. Sheriff Ford.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon. As a citizen of Bay County and as sheriff, I'm angry that those we trusted to help in our darkest days following Hurricane Michael betrayed us and took advantage of us. This case has made it clear that there has been a corruption in the way that certain business is conducted in our community. We will not tolerate that and will be aggressive in our fight to reform this corruption. There may be time for some to change their ways, and for others, it is too late. Let me be clear that these arrests represent the beginning of this case, and I fully anticipate additional indictments and arrests will make the scope of this problem clear to the residents of Bay County. As sheriff, I'm committed to work to root out corruption and hold those responsible for taking advantage of us accountable. Earlier this year, we created a team of senior criminal investigators and an analyst from the Bay County Sheriff's Office to work this case. I am so proud of their dedication, hard work, and the great work that they've done alongside our partners with the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the U.S. Attorney's Office. I'm committed to continue to dedicate these resources to address this important issue. I appreciate the efforts and the expertise of our partners with the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office, and I'm grateful for U.S. Attorney Larry Keefe for his commitment to hold those in the public trust accountable and to shine a bright light on issues that have plagued our community for way too long. Bay County is a great place to work, live, and do business. There are so many businesses in Bay County that have worked so hard to help us rebuild and have done so with the utmost integrity. We also have many, many great public servants whose integrity is beyond reproach. Our future is bright as we rebuild from Hurricane Michael, but we will not allow the actions of a few to tarnish the reputation of this great county and all that are doing the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. The people of Florida should know this important truth. The vast majority of those who are in public service, the men and women who serve in all levels of our government, are truly dedicated public servants. They work loyally to provide the trusted service that our citizens expect and deserve. But, as we have said before, that very small group that serves for their own illegal benefit and profit, and those who illegally seek to influence them, will be the continued targets of our work in the Public Trust Unit. The greatest cost of public corruption is the potential widespread loss of public trust in our own government. Corruption is a dangerous virus that threatens to infect public service and the public's trust in that public service. We are committed to stopping the spread of the virus of corruption. In addition to our federal, state, and local law enforcement partners, every single citizen has a meaningful role to play in this fight against corruption. If you see or know something, then please say something. Please call or email the corruption hotline that is on our website in the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Florida. The news media, you all, also have a vital watchdog role in the fight against public corruption. The news media is often in the best position to learn of, to investigate, and to shine a light on corrupt government officials and corrupt practices. Every time a local newspaper closes or cuts its newsroom staff, opportunities to bring public fraud, waste, and abuse into the sunshine are lost. Just as our Public Trust Unit has added additional resources to fight public corruption and secure our election process, we remain hopeful that Florida's news media can find new ways to add investigative reporters and other resources to discover and develop stories that bring public corruption into the Florida sunshine. With that, we will take some questions, but I want to preface the question and response period with everyone's probable awareness that we are at the indictment phase, that all of the defendants that have been indicted in this case are presumed innocent until they are proven guilty at a trial or until they plead guilty. Caution must be taken in terms of talking about the ongoing aspects of this investigation into other things that continue to be under investigation. So I want you to understand that this office, in accordance with the theme of independence that I told you about, is committed also to transparency, that we cannot violate rules that have to do with ongoing investigations, the secrecy of the grand jury process, but to the extent that we can, we want to be responsive and not just march out of the room right now and go back to work. We want to engage in your questions. So direct your questions to me, and to the extent appropriate, I can refer them to my colleagues. But what we're here today to talk about are the things that are alleged, the facts that are alleged in the indictment. So with that preface or caveat, are there any questions? Yes.
News 13's Kayla Tucker. You guys mentioned earlier other city officials had work done on their homes. Who are those city officials, and what is going to happen to them, specifically Mayor Margo Anderson?
Yeah, we are not in a position at this time to get into anything beyond the individuals identified in this indictment. As I mentioned to you, the investigation's ongoing, and at the appropriate time, we'll disclose what we can in accordance with those rules that I described to you. Yes?
Olivia Michael, News Channel 7 and Local 18 News. What will become of the FEMA reimbursements that were made under these false pretenses, if anything?
Yeah, that is also part of the ongoing work in the case. There's issues that have to do with forfeiture of some of the equipment that was used during the course of the scheme, and then in the overall process of where things stood relative to the city and FEMA. That's all is aware of those, and those are among the array of things that we're looking at. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry. Do you anticipate any other indictments in the Western Panhandle area?
Well, we can't say specifically what the grand jury will or will not do. I would emphasize once again, it is an ongoing investigation, and when it's appropriate and when we're able, we will share more about the ongoing investigation. Yes, I guess you were next.
I'm sure I'll get a similar answer, but the county commissioner that went on that trip to Gatlinburg, Tennessee, can you identify that commissioner and tell us what charges he faces, if any?
Yeah, no, I understand your question, and I understand the thirst for knowledge and to know more, but in keeping with our duties and responsibilities in law enforcement, we simply can't share any of that information at this time. But I would seek and hope to earn the public's trust that when we are able to share more, that we will share more, but at this time I can't. Yes?
I believe you indicated that the money stolen was City of Lynn Haven money. Was it federal money that came back to Lynn Haven and through Lynn Haven? How did that?
Mr. Coons, can you address that?
Yeah, the indictment indicates the scheme to defraud was defraud Lynn Haven, which issued checks for all those invoices. Now, Lynn Haven also procedurally, as the indictment indicates, submitted these invoices to FEMA for reimbursement. But other than outside the indictment, I can't discuss any more about what's happened with that. But it's just so you understand, Lynn Haven right now is the victim of this scheme to defraud, and they're out approximately $5 million. Now, the nature of what reimbursement, if any, is going to happen with FEMA, that's another issue for another day. Thank you.
Yes.
And so, how did you kind of get to this point, or what tipped off investigators that this was occurring?
Well, once again, since it's an ongoing investigation, it's a fluid process, and so that which those factors that were part of the origin of the investigation, to reveal and talk about those would perhaps prejudice or complicate things. I know one thing, that Sheriff Tommy Ford and his office has been integral in the entire process, and as of course I mentioned, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Special Agent in Charge Rojas, have done fantastic work over a substantial period of time to develop the origins of this case, which I once again emphasize continues and is ongoing.
I guess I'm just wondering if you can say maybe more generally, was it like a citizen report, or is it something that other officials caught on to, or anything? Can you give anything?
Yeah, I really can't at this time, because the methods and means and the sources by which we obtain the information would potentially compromise the ongoing nature of the investigation as to how we knew what we know to get where we are. Okay. Yes, sir.
Yes, I believe most of what you've talked about today came after Hurricane Michael. Does the investigation go back in time prior to the hurricane and events that might have been going on?
Yeah, once again, in the spirit of transparency and trying to say everything I can, things can be inferred and extrapolated if we talk about the origins, the cause of the origins, the scope of the investigation, that will harm our mission to bring all of this to light and to bring it all into the sunshine. I wish I could say more about those things. I understand the need and want to know. When we can, we will share what we can. Yes, sir.
The approximate, two parts. The approximate $5 million, is that what they were defrauded of, or is that their total that they submitted for checks? Like, is that all of their invoices, or is that what has been determined as fraud?
Mr. Coons, I think that would probably be best.
Yeah, that's the amount of money that was requested and then obtained from Lynn Haven based on fraudulent invoices by both ECS and Greenleaf. Okay.
So, is there anything mentioned about kind of the relationship, like how these officials knew these contractors, and were there any other gifts involved or kickbacks, or was it just kind of the work that was done?
Once again, all we can really talk about in this amplification and this question and answer is what's said in the indictment. And I understand the need and the desire to know, and it's your mission to find out everything you can about all those interstitial facts that connect all the people and the transactions and so forth, but I really can't go into that.
Last question.
Yes, sir.
Can you talk at all about who the owners of some of the vehicles confiscated, particularly the 2019 trucks, $60,000 vehicles?
Mr. Coons, is that something we can?
I think we can indicate seizure warrants were authorized by the court for approximately 40 items, including real property that a lease pendants was filed on today. The way forfeiture works is the defendants who are charged, any interest they have in these items can be forfeited, and that's what's alleged upon conviction.
Or can you identify who the owners?
I can't. We can't go into that right now.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Take care.
You've been watching a live news conference here at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Panama City. A news conference wrapped up by Lawrence Keefe, the U.S. Attorney, ran just under almost 35 minutes. A public corruption scheme, the second group of indictments announced today here in Panama City, defrauding Lynn Haven City almost $5 million, work that was never done, invoices that were turned in for various things like garbage pickup, debris pickup after Hurricane Michael last year to the city of Lynn Haven to the tune of almost $5 million. If you missed the 5 names announced today, Michael White, former Lynn Haven City Manager, David Horton, Lynn Haven Community Services Director, Mitchell White, owner of Erosion Control Specialists Incorporated, Shannon Rodriguez, the employee of Erosion Control Specialists, and Joshua Daniel Anderson, owner of Greenleaf Lawn Care, all named in a 35-count indictment facing federal charges, wire fraud, mail fraud, money laundering, and so much more. Again, false invoices claimed to be turned in for work that was never done to the city of Lynn Haven, almost $5 million. The U.S. Attorney's Office today represented the FBI along with Bay County Sheriff Tommy Ford. The officials today saying that this investigation is not over. They anticipate more arrests and indictments in the future. News 13 will continue to stay on top of this story this afternoon. Stay tuned to mypanhandle.com for latest updates. We'll have complete coverage on News 13 live at 5 and News 13 at 6 on this ongoing public corruption case here in the Panhandle. I'm Jerry Brown, News 13. We now rejoin our regular programming.